Some youngins just blew up a firework behind my car. There's some of the paper from it. I'm sick of this shit. There's some more paper from it. There's a silver pickup truck.
All I know is I don't point fingers, but if you hear something, please let me know, okay?
Did you hear that firework? That was some youngins throwing stuff at my car. Some youngins throwing stuff at my car. They threw a firework at me.
Oh, those bastards.
Yep.
Didn't forget. So what are you driving now? Huh? What are you driving?
He hasn't had a break since he had lunch. It's been even on break.
It should be at 7:99. Is your break time, Jay? What? Is your break time? Where we go? I mean,
Well, we took lunch at what, 4:30?
7 and then 9 should be the last two breaks, right?
He's an hour late for that.
Have Helen or Krista, whoever. Helen is the closer too, right?
Yeah. And Chris is.
I'm assuming Helen also needs
A last break, probably.
two.
I don't know, the year before Jason.
Okay. Two breaks or no breaks? Yes.
I
Okay,
had
so-
lunch.
Okay, so
That's what I've had.
right after Jay comes back, go ahead and take your break, okay?
Okay.
I punched your sweet skin. Somebody found batteries.
No.
Yep. Magnets.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I found it on the top.
We're gonna put like little papers on something. Call me if you need anything, okay?
I'm gonna say, I gotta get strong.
Okay.
Here you are, my sweet lady.
All right.
You're going on.
All right. Hello. Didn't I just see you here not too long ago? I'm sure you're not as bad as I used to be. I used to come to the store basically every day. Everything okay?
No, ma'am. Although I was being patient. I figured it was some sort of shift change thing. I was just patient at all with stuff out.
Well, what is it you're trying to do?
There was some youngins that threw some fireworks in my car out in the parking lot. I wasn't sure who I should let know about it, but I figured I should let somebody know.
Okay. Oh, Lord, let me think. Barb? Are you around?
Well, you can tell Miguel. I don't know that there's really anything we can do about it, darling. As long as they're not aiming them at you or something.
They threw it right at my vehicle.
Huh?
They threw it right at my vehicle. They pulled up right behind my vehicle, lit it, and threw it at my vehicle.
Oh, they were in a car.
I think I would have called the cops.
They said we pick up. They're not gonna listen to a homeless man.
Oh, sure.
I cried.
So was it in our parking lot or on the street?
It was in the parking lot.
Well, next time get their license plate stuff.
I got out and I tried to get the. I'm not real fast, like it,
So,
But get as much as you can get. We'll write it down. We'll call it in for you, is what she's saying.
yes, ma'am. It's the same vehicle as before that was doing similar stuff, but before they were doing it when I was over at the library parking lot. I do have their license plate number.
Oh,
written
that's
down.
good.
It's just I have to dig it out of my vehicle, but it is the same vehicle.
Okay, honey.
Yeah, them youngins been relentless.
What's that?
I said, them youngins been relentless. They got like 3 different vehicles they keep bouncing back and forth
Close
in
right,
the
not
grass.
here at all.
I said, they got like 3 or 4 different vehicles they bounce around in to harass me.
Oh, that's not cool. Come on, Zane.
I better get back to my car and make sure my stuff's safe.
Okay, well, good to see you. I'm sorry that's happening. Thank you very much. My first ended up home with a friend of mine. I'm not too happy about it, so, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Well, it looks like there's all sorts of cops across the street. 3 of them right there. 3 different cop vehicles, of course. I wonder if they got a call about a gunshot, because it wasn't a gunshot. It was for certainly fireworks. Looks like they're over at the bank. Maybe somebody tried to break in or something. Or maybe they're trying to chase somebody down on foot. Maybe they got something on camera. They're wondering what it is. I was gonna start this video about something else, but as I was titling it, that's when them youngins went by and they stopped behind me. Of course, they threw a firework and then sped off. It's when they sped off, I knew something was up. It went pop right behind my car. And the car's having issues. Apparently there's some little shits who put some sugar on my gas tank, which ain't no fun. Of course, my back isn't in any shape to lift up my hood to find out if that's true or not. I know where the fuel filter is. I just gotta be able to open up the hood and take a look. The guy who was gonna go up the mountains with me today, he said with the way my vehicle's running, it's running real rough, and it does sound and smell like there's some sugar in the tank. Then there's the chucking of the pumpkins at my vehicle, the threatening to kill me, the calling me the racial slurs, the anti-Semitic stuff, the anti-homosexual stuff, the anti-LGBT stuff, just the most hateful stuff that you could say about a person. Somehow it's magically okay to hurt me because I'm a male. I get it. That don't make it okay. There's a lot of people in town that are really fucked up on drugs. You know, there's a lot of folks that if they'd paid any goddamn attention to my channel, there's a lot of actual bad predators, bad people, people whose intentions are not good. They just pretend they are. You get on my channel and do just a little bit of work, and you catch a lot of those son of a bitches and prevent them from hurting anybody again. Put them in places where they can't hurt other people. But you're not doing that, are you? So I got a camp full of garbage up the mountain. Craig was right, though. We were getting ready to go out of town, and I told him I should know within the first hill or two going up the mountains whether or not it's safe. And he made the executive decision on the way out. He didn't want to get trapped out there, and of course I don't want to get trapped out there either, and I certainly don't want to get trapped out there and get him trapped out there, so we came back in. I don't have the money to repair the damage that's been done to my vehicle. It's been vandalized repeatedly. Candace vandalized it. Her friend vandalized it. Them youngins vandalized it with pumpkins, soda bottles, keys. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, Andrew Wolnez vandalized it, kicked it twice. And then there's Molly breaking stuff on my vehicle and kicking it and hitting it. And fuck. Of course, throwing fireworks. And it's just fucked up. Anyway, I should probably go in there. I did actually intend on getting something. That's the whole reason I'm in this fucking parking lot. So I better go in and get it. I'm not sitting right with all that trash up there, though. That's one thing I never do. And don't get me wrong, my hand was on fire, but it was healing up. I probably could have stayed up there a little extra. Mimi Blue Zero typed hi. I mean, oh, them cops are gone already, it looks like. Whatever it is, it must not have been that important. It's important enough to have 3 of them there, though. Doesn't look like they stopped here. We're at the library parking lot, so whoever they're looking for, or whatever they're looking for, it's not exactly local.
Welcome. If you have your club card, please scan it now. 179. If you have your club card, please scan it now. Your card has been accepted. How many store-provided bags? Your total is 1 and your savings is 20 cents. Please wait. System processing. Follow the instructions on the pin pad. Please remember to take your receipts. Thank you. Welcome. If you have your club card, please scan it now. Scan items one at a time, placing them in the bagging area after each scan. For items that are
I saw Jay, but he's moving super fast.
They're coming too.
Oh, thank you. Good looking out.
Like I said, it's part of the firework. There's part of it. There's part of it. Oh, looks like they drove by and threw another one at it. Beautiful, ain't it? Lucky for me, it's wet out. Yeah. What complete fucking sweethearts. Anyway, I decided to rush start this video just specifically because the little bastard's throwing these. Shit. My pants just split some more. Fucking A. I guess I'm gonna have to wrap that blanket around my waist as a skirt. I got a pink badge that says sheriff on it, covering the hole, but I just popped the badge. That's right, I got a pink badge only inches from my butthole. Well, at least there's evidence of it. Alright, so sometimes when I turn on my phone, it's frozen up. And then it gets stuck on something like this. I don't know what the hell it is. It's just some random video. At Just Pearly Things, Karma attacks Tom Brady's ex. Maybe this is one of those things where they show you stuff based on what you look at already. I don't know. Alright, it's frozen on another one. I'm basically just recording now in case more bullshit. Sometimes they'll drive by 2 or 3 times in a row. Sometimes they'll drive by once and then they'll drive by hours later and do it again. And people don't understand how or why that overwhelms me. It's stupid. The hell's this?
We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Oh. Well, that's interesting, because stealth fighter and a Apache helicopter firing some rockets. Oh, it's a few of them. Cute. Some APCs. I don't know what the hell we're watching, but it's all CGI. Sorry y'all are stuck with me. I guess you'll just be stuck getting educated and the stuff I'm learning about. I apologize to those of you who don't care about defusing mines. That's most of what I've been learning recently. There's a lot that I've been looking at that the best thing to do is to blow it up in place. So I guess I'll get back to that. See, I don't want to kill anybody ever for any reason. I'm not interested in killing people, but I'm certainly not gonna let people just kill kids. That's some goddamn bullshit. And I figure with y'all being some lazy sumbitches who don't give a holy goddamn about anybody but yourselves, I guess that leaves it down to crazy people like me, right? I firmly believe everybody's crazy, just so you know that. You can't convince me otherwise because, well, you're human. You have abstract thoughts. As a result, you have the same animal instincts as everyone else and every other animal on the planet. But unlike every animal on the planet, you will make excuses. You will lie about it. On the bright side, I have a tobacco pipe. On the not so bright side, that's the nastiest way to smoke a cigarette. I suppose if I'm going to do this, I ought to set up my phone so that it'll look at the other phone. And that way you guys can see what it is that I'm looking at, instead of me just telling you. Oh, flechettes. Damn. Now that's for surely something to look at. Let's see if we can get this thing to actually record from here.
Flechettes. The name comes from the French meaning small arrows or darts, and these have been used in a variety of weapon systems over the past 100 years. Though you could argue that they've actually been in use for a lot longer, and indeed that they were the original firearms projectiles. Now, one of the earliest depictions of a firearm in use that we know about comes from the illuminated manuscript De Officiis Regnum, written in 1326 by English scholar Walter de Millimete, and it depicts a soldier firing a strange vase-shaped cannon known as a pot de fer, or iron pot. But instead of firing a cannonball, it's firing a giant arrow. Now, this might seem strange to us today, but it really makes a lot of sense as a logical extension of existing technology, basically a gunpowder age adaptation of a giant crossbow or ballista. Now, early firearms makers quickly realized that solid stone or metal cannonballs made for superior projectiles. Not only were they more destructive, but they were also more durable, meaning you could pick them up off the battlefield and use them over and over again, whereas a gun arrow would be irreparably damaged on the first shot. However, gun arrows did remain in the arsenals of many nations for another 200 years. In fact, the English adventurer and privateer Sir Francis Drake lists gun arrows among the stores of his ship in 1588. However, the story of flechettes proper really begins in the early 20th century, with the modern incarnation of this weapon being developed by the Italians in the 1910s. Now, between 1911 and 1912, Italy fought a war against the Ottoman Empire in the North African territory of Libya. And while this war is not very well remembered today, it's historically significant because it saw the first use of heavier-than-air craft in combat, with Italian pilots not only flying the first aerial reconnaissance mission with aircraft, but also the first aerial bombardment. And
This
while
grenade
initially
dropped
they used
from metric
adapted
Taub
infantry weapons like grenades for this purpose,
over
they also
Turkey.
developed flechettes as one of the first purpose-built weapons for aerial warfare.
They just dropped
these
them.
consisted of large steel darts with fins that were meant to be launched from the air onto large concentrations of troops on the ground. and this could either be done singly by just throwing them out the cockpit of the aircraft, but more often they were packaged together in large boxes that were mounted either within the fuselage or underneath it, and the pilot would pull a string to open the box and release a salvo of flechettes onto the target. Now, these weapons would later be adopted by the French and then the Germans and the British, and were used extensively in the opening years of the First World War. And during the war, flechettes were typically dropped in groups of between 20 and 250, with one French pilot in March 1915 having been recorded as dropping over 18,000 flechettes in a single day. And the Germans seem to have not really appreciated having this weapon used against them by the French, because when they finally adopted flechettes for themselves, they made sure to engrave every single one with the words French invention, German manufacture. Quite a nasty piece of pettiness there. The British also didn't like these weapons, but for completely different reasons, with one Royal Flying Corps officer being quoted in the War Illustrated as saying, "Our aviators think arrow dropping dirty work, because the enemy cannot hear the things coming, and because they make such nasty wounds. Also, it was not possible to drop them with sufficient accuracy." In other words, just like submarine warfare, they believed flechettes to be ungentlemanly and damned un-British. However, they did experiment extensively with the use of flechettes not against personnel, but rather against German Zeppelins. And the idea here is that an airman would climb up above the Zeppelin and drop these flechettes down on top of it, and they would pierce through the envelope and the gas bags. Unfortunately, this proved as ineffective as just firing regular ammunition at the Zeppelins. All it did was punch some relatively small holes in the envelope, which would leak so slowly that it really wouldn't make a difference to the Zeppelin's mission. Later, the British would invent incendiary bullets to increase their chances of actually setting the Zeppelin ablaze and taking it down. And in the same vein, a Royal Navy commander named Francis Rankin came up with the Rankin anti-Zeppelin dart. And just like previous versions, this was meant to be dropped on the Zeppelin from above, but it had a set of folding fins attached to the detonator of an incendiary charge. So when it actually punched through the envelope of the Zeppelin, the fins would get left behind and they would pull the detonator and activate the charge. But while this worked in principle, in practice, it proved a lot harder to set a Zeppelin alight than it would seem. This is because of one crucial missing ingredient: oxygen. If you set off an incendiary in the middle of a space full of pure hydrogen, like the gas bag of a Zeppelin, nothing is going to happen because there is no oxygen for that hydrogen to react with. And so the tactic that the British eventually came up with that really worked well was to arm their aircraft with an alternating belt of explosive and incendiary ammunition. The explosive ammunition would blow big holes in the envelope of the Zeppelin, allowing oxygen to enter and mix with the hydrogen. And then the incendiary ammunition would set off that mixture, and this worked really quite well. Now, in the anti-personnel role, flechettes were gruesomely effective, but the problem was they had to score a direct hit in order to cause any damage. And by 1917, they were almost completely phased out in favor of far more effective weapons, basically high explosive bombs, which could affect the area immediately around them and required less precise aim. So the development of flechettes more or less went dormant for the next 40 years, only being resurrected shortly after the Second World War. And one of the first such developments was called Project Lazy Dog, and this was a U.S. Navy effort to develop an air-dropped anti-personnel weapon that could make use of their vast stocks of surplus 50 BMG machine gun ammunition. And the development process was quite interesting. They would empty the propellant powder out of the casings of the 50 BMG rounds, and then cut and shape the casing into various configurations of stabilizing fins. And then they would test the aerodynamic performance of all of these different configurations. And tests were conducted both in wind tunnels and also in live drop tests at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. What they found was that the ideal aerodynamic configuration used not the full bullet with its lead and copper jacket components, but rather the steel core of the bullet fitted with a small set of folded metal fins. And this was adopted as the Yellow Dog or Lazy Dog bomb, and I have an example of one right here. So initially they used the cores of surplus 50 BMG ammunition, but eventually as these weapons were adopted on a much larger scale, they started manufacturing them from scratch. This is an earlier version that has a forged steel body. Later versions were actually machined on a lathe, but both had the same type of folded sheet metal tail fins. So Lazy Dog bombs were used during both the Korean and Vietnam Wars and were deployed in a number of different ways, some as simple as just chucking buckets of them from a helicopter as you flew over the jungle. But more typically, they were deployed from cluster munition adapters such as the Mark 44 or the Mark IV Mod 0 Glad-Eye. And so up to 2,000 of these projectiles would be packed into these
Now we're advanced to the
and these
Rockeye
would be
3
suspended
system.
from the hard points of an aircraft and released over the target. And after a certain distance, a fuse in the nose of the canister would cause it to split open and release the projectiles. These are found to be incredibly effective at penetrating thick jungle canopy and simple wooden shelters. And they were absolutely devastating when used against large concentrations of enemy troops out in the open. Indeed, when dropped from a high-speed ground attack aircraft, these could develop the terminal energy equivalent to a 50 BMG round. In testing, they were able to penetrate 2 feet of packed sand. And when dropped from something like a Skyraider or a helicopter, they could still develop quite a bit of terminal energy, somewhere between a 45 ACP and a 30 carbine bullet. So really not something that you want to be at the receiving end of. So around the same period, the U.S. Army was doing a lot of research on the application of flechettes to individual infantry weapons. And the reason for this has to do with some reports that came out of the Second World War that showed that most infantry engagements took place at ranges less than
400
300
yards.
yards. And that
300,
the
huh?
average infantryman who is tired and hungry and under a lot of stress takes about 10,000 shots in order to score 1 hit on the enemy. This sort of flew in the face of conventional U.S. Army doctrine, which focused a lot on individual marksmanship, on single, carefully aimed
Right.
shots made at long ranges. It became apparent that soldiers needed a lot more firepower in order to make them more effective. And this, of course, led to the development of the assault rifle concept of having an intermediate cartridge halfway between a full-powered rifle cartridge and a pistol cartridge, which allowed you to achieve a balance between controllable automatic fire and sufficient accuracy at the shorter ranges over which infantry engagements typically took place. But the U.S. Army wanted to go one step further and develop a weapon that was capable of even greater firepower, so that, say, if you're on patrol in the jungle and you only see the enemy for a brief moment, you were able to send a lot of projectiles down range in a very short amount of time, greatly increasing your chances of making a hit. And so in 1951, the U.S. Army started something called Project Salvo to investigate methods of achieving this type of firepower. And there were a number of different methods that were proposed, including the use of duplex or triplex bullets, basically one bullet stacked on top of another within the same cartridge. And this meant that for a single recoil impulse, you could send multiple projectiles downrange, increasing your hit probability. But while Project Salvo didn't lead to the adoption of any new weapons, it did eventually evolve into the Special Purpose Infantry Weapon Project, or Project SPEW, which began in 1962 and involved a number of different firearms manufacturers, including
those were
H&R,
stupid.
Winchester, Springfield, and Advanced Armaments Incorporated, or AAI. And by this time, the methodology had shifted
Like 2 or
from
3
duplex
bullets
or
in the same
triplex
casing
bullets
and shit.
to the use of flechettes. And the logic here is that flechettes can be made significantly lighter than regular bullets, meaning that they will impart a softer recoil impulse when they're fired. And so you can have a weapon with a 3-round burst capability where by the time you actually start feeling the recoil impulse and the firearm starts to rise and go off aim, the 3 flechettes have already left the barrel and are on their way to the target. So you get the advantage of having a shotgun with multiple projectiles going towards the target, along with the long-range accuracy of a rifle. However, since flechettes are significantly lighter than regular bullets, in order to give them the same terminal energy and thus the same terminal effect as regular bullets, they need to be fired at a much higher velocity. But thankfully, here the physics actually works in your favor, since kinetic energy is given by 1/2 mv squared, whereas momentum, which is responsible for the recoil force, is given by mv. This means that if you have a projectile that is a quarter of the weight of a regular bullet but is traveling twice as fast, you will get the same terminal energy but only half the recoil impulse. So velocity is also key when it comes to the stability of a flechette. So the stability of a fin-stabilized projectile is dependent on the aerodynamic forces imparted on its tail fins, which serve to correct any deviation from its flight path. And those aerodynamic forces are dependent on two main factors: the size, the surface area of the fins, and the velocity of the projectile. But if you want your flechette to fit inside the barrel of a regular firearm, those fins can't be too big. And so to achieve sufficient stability, the flechette needs to travel at a much higher velocity. This has important implications in certain applications of flechettes, but we'll get there in a moment. Now, while all of this is fairly straightforward in principle, in practice, companies like AAI had significant difficulties in getting flechette firing rifles to work. And one of the main problems had to do with the fact that the flechette, or at least the front half of the flechette, is of a different diameter than the gun barrel. And so you need some way of supporting the flechette as it's traveling down the barrel.
Sabot.
And the most obvious way of doing this is with a sabot, sort of plastic shoe that fits over the front and the back of the flechette, fills out the space between it
Or
and the
literally
barrel,
part of a
supports it
sock.
all the way out of the firearm. And then when it clears
Or a
the barrel,
rag or
the
toilet
sabot
paper.
falls away and the flechette continues on its merry way. Now, in normal sabot ammunition, like say the armor-piercing rounds used by certain tanks, the sabot wraps around the rear of the projectile. However, since flechettes are so long, this would create an unacceptably long cartridge, and so instead you have to put the sabot at the front of the flechette and have the rest of it inside the
It breaks off
casing.
though, and
This is where
sometimes
you
it
really
scrapes
start
up the
running into
inside of your
difficulties,
barrel.
because you have to get the material
It can
and
actually
design
wedge
and
itself and
tension
fire
of
it
that
out the
puller
side.
sabot
It's a bad
just
idea.
right. If it's too loose, it'll fly off the end of the flechette, leaving it behind in the barrel, or the flechette will just come out of the barrel at a very low velocity. If it's too tight and it doesn't release early enough, it's going to stay with the flechette and it's going to affect its aerodynamics and its accuracy. Or at worst, and this actually happened in testing, it will basically snap the flechette in half and leave the rear back in barrel. And indeed, because of such difficulties, AAI found that the accuracy of its SPEW rifles was absolutely atrocious, and neither SPEW nor the follow-on Advanced Combat Rifle, or ACR program, succeeded in producing an adequate flechette firing replacement for the M16. And if you want to learn more about those, go over to Forgotten Weapons. Ian has a couple of videos on developmental rifles from Project Salvo, Project SPEW, and ACR. Now, one type of flechette-firing personal infantry weapon that did see service during the Vietnam War was the combat shotgun, and two companies, the Western Cartridge Company and the Federal Cartridge Company, produced shot shells containing 18mm long flechettes. The Western shot shells containing 20 flechettes and the Federal shot shells 25 flechettes. But these were found to be quite ineffective. And if you go over to the channel Tauflita Mouse, he tests out one of these shot shells and finds that the flechettes don't fire straight at all. They actually tend to tumble and keyhole quite badly. And the reason for this has to do with the stability problem that we discussed before. If you want a fin-stabilized projectile to fly straight, you either need to make the fins large enough or you need to fire the projectile fast enough. But if you want to pack as many flechettes into a shot shell as possible, in fact, that's the reason for having this weapon system in the first place, you can't make the fins too big. The problem with the shotgun is that it can only handle up to a certain amount of pressure and muzzle velocity. And in this case, that muzzle velocity turned out to be not fast enough to get sufficient aerodynamic effect out of those tiny fins. And so the darts aren't stable at all. And as soon as they start to veer off course, they will start to tumble. So another type of flechette firing munition that was widely used during the Vietnam War was the so-called beehive round. And this was intended for use by artillery such as the 106mm recoilless rifle or 105mm howitzers to allow artillery batteries to defend themselves at close range against enemy attacks, basically taking the same role as canister shot or grape shot in earlier eras. And there are two differing explanations as to how these came to be known as beehive rounds. One is that the sound of hundreds of flechettes flying through the air sounded like a swarm of angry bees, whereas the other, more plausible explanation is that the round, with all of its flechettes stacked inside of chambers inside, looked like an old-fashioned beehive. However, these rounds were eventually replaced in service with a set of tactics known as Killer Senior or Killer Junior, depending on what caliber of artillery was being used, and this involved short fusing regular high explosive shells that they detonated very close to the battery and showered the attacking enemy with fragments. And flechette firing shells are still used to this day, typically fired by tanks, again for anti-personnel use. For example, the United States has the M546 APERS, or anti-personnel shell for 105mm weapons, which contains some 8,000 flechettes, while the Russians have the 122mm SH-1 flechette shell, which they've recently used in certain parts of Ukraine. Israel also uses flechette shells, and in one infamous incident in April 2008, an IDF tank fired a flechette round at Reuters cameraman Fidel Shana because they thought that his camera was a weapon. And this ended up killing Shana as well as 8 civilians in the surrounding area. Now, something worth noting here is one application in which the use of flechettes is absolutely essential, and that is in underwater firearms. So, ordinary bullets designed for use in air don't perform very well underwater. They lose energy very quickly, and they're not stable. So if you want to have a firearm that works effectively underwater, you need to fire not a regular bullet, but rather a long dart-shaped projectile that is drag stabilized and not gyroscopically.
All right, we're going to pause it here. One thing that's important to note is that you can sometimes, as long as you put bags around it first, sometimes you can douse a explosive with different chemicals that will, well, for example, sometimes all you need to do is take out the primer. In order to do that, sometimes you can neutralize it with different chemicals. And in some cases, just dousing something with water is enough to make it so that it's rendered useless. That's why it's important to know your explosives and to know what you're working with. Now, once in a while, people change things up and give you a surprise you weren't ready for and weren't expecting. One of the reasons for Israel, even though they had the access and still have access to a lot of Russian weapons, it's not because they're friends with the United States that they don't. It's because a lot of that stuff, Hamas has stuff that's interchangeable and it's not of the same quality. And you don't want your guys picking up some of the enemy's substandard weapons just because they look like something that was built decent back in the day.
Stabilized, and this has been successfully implemented in a number of firearms, including the Soviet APS and ASM DT rifles and SPP-1 pistol, and the Heckler & Koch P11 pistol. If you want to learn more about underwater firearms, I wrote an entire video on the subject over on Today I Found Out. And finally, we get to our last example of a flechette. These are out of a CRB-7. This is a 2.75-inch unguided rocket weapon widely used by multiple NATO nations. And the CRB-7 was developed in the early 1970s by Bristol Aerospace to Dave Magellan of Winnipeg, Manitoba, my hometown. And this was an offshoot of the development of the Black Brant sounding rocket, which used a new type of high-energy rocket propellant. And what Bristol did was to apply this propellant to a new 2.75-inch rocket weapon along the same lines as the American Hydra 70. And the resulting weapon, the CRB-7, turned out to be significantly more powerful than the Hydra 70. It had a flatter trajectory, it had 1,000 meters more standoff distance, and 3 times the terminal energy. And this led to a rather funny incident at a NATO weapons demonstration in France. Now, the competitors were supposed to fire inert rockets, that is with no warhead, at a target tower. But the Canadian pilot, being used to firing the less powerful Hydra 70, fired his rocket from too close a range, so that when it actually struck the target, there was still burning propellant in the motor. And so the casing shattered, exposed the propellant to the air, and this caused a rapid deflagration that completely destroyed the tower. And Canada was temporarily disqualified from the competition because the judges couldn't believe that the rocket was unarmed. It just had that much kinetic energy. And indeed, during firing trials in Canada, it was found that even the practice warhead, which is simply a mild steel rod with a nylon casing, could still penetrate the top armor of the Centurion tanks they were using as targets. And
Fuck.
this led to the development of the Flechette anti-tank, or FAT, warhead, which contains 5 large tungsten darts capable of penetrating the top and side armor of a T-72 tank at a range of 3,000 meters, as well as the GPF, or General Purpose Flechette warhead, and that contains 80 of these little flechettes. And how this works is that the CRV-7 is spin stabilized. It has spiral vanes in its motor nozzle that cause it to start spinning even before it leaves its launcher. And once it has left the launcher, a set of spring-loaded fins deploy and cause the rocket to start spinning faster. Now, the motor burns for about 2 seconds, and once it's burned out, it activates a small gunpowder charge in the warhead that shoots the canister containing these flechettes out the front. And then the centrifugal force causes all of the flechettes to be thrown out sideways, creating a large spread of flechettes to rain down on the target. And I actually once worked a summer at Magellan Aerospace at the facility where they make the CRV-7, and I got to see one of these warheads being fired. And what they did was they put it in a lathe and spun it up to its working RPM and then fired off the warhead at a high-speed camera. And I can tell you the footage of those darts coming out into this big spiral of death is absolutely terrifying. And just as terrifying is the fact that that tiny gunpowder charge managed to propel the nose cone of the warhead through one of the 2 layers of bulletproof glass that was protecting the high-speed camera. And despite their small size, these flechettes are actually capable of penetrating up to 1.5 inches of roll-hardened armor, making them useful against lighter armored vehicles, soft-skinned vehicles, buildings, and other relatively soft targets. And
That's right, a building is a relatively soft target.
Designed to be used from helicopters, and they're used by a variety of NATO nations, including the UK, who really liked using these things in Afghanistan against large concentrations of enemy fighters. So once again, something you really don't want to be on the receiving end of. And so there you have a brief history of the Flechette, one of the more fascinating, if under-discussed weapons to have come out in the last 100 years. Now, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time on another episode where we'll have a look at yet more fascinating military and civilian hardware. Until then, I'm Jean Messi from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.
The total number of U.S. helicopter missions into Cambodia
This is a Hydra
a military
70.
secret, although it is known that more than 10,000 sorties were flown across the border in the last month alone.
We go out and we look for activity, and in the form of trails, bunkers, hooches, bicycles, vehicles, anything that would indicate the presence of NVA units. And of course we draw a lot of fire that way, and that's how we locate their positions.
It's kind of a risky thing, locating the enemy by drawing his fire.
I suppose you could say it that way, but that's our job.
Yeah, I'm going to call Max now. Come on out. On a typical mission, a Cobra gunship flies shotgun overhead, while a smaller chopper with 2 men aboard scouts the terrain below.
Usually an OH-6.
Bunkers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bunker openings here.
They tried a couple, but the OH-6 is what they settled with. Probably because it set 23 world records. Oh yeah, and you can crash it repeatedly and just roll up into a ball. You could magically come out the other end alive because of the A-frame in it, and the eggshell shape.
We got a fire on that one there. I think there's a tunnel complex under this too.
Now this one's actually about flechettes or flechettes. Now that's what's called passive. Now we've got what's called an active munitions. Active cluster. Active cluster munitions. This stuff right here, the reason for it, this is some of the stuff, landmines are the bigger deal. But some of this stuff, well, we'll just play it for you, is the stuff that people who go out and clear bombs and clear mines, a lot of times they have to clear cluster munition sites where they could run into any number of cluster-launched landmines, anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines. Some of these mines have like spider wire comes out of them, and it'll basically launch a tripwire in 3 or 4 different directions. So any direction that you walk through it, since it launches them straight out the side, if they drop it on a field with some decent grass, basically the walking through of the field, you're not going to be able to see the wire. You're going to trip it. It's gonna do some bad stuff. Now these ones right here are supposedly anti-tank. The ones that are round, they spin around a certain direction, and once they've spun a certain amount of times, it arms them. It doesn't always work, and as a result, when people go into a lot of these cluster munition sites, you know, they'll go for anywhere from 20 to 50 of these things in a small area, because they don't just drop one cluster munition at a time either. And some of the piles of munitions, literally cluster munition canisters, they're easily identifiable because of the internal workings of them, and the external case is literally just a piece of sheet metal that pops off. The internal racks, they store the munitions so that the primers are not set, and then of course once the racks are shifted, it lets them free, and then the rack itself is gonna have some sort of either explosive tip, explosive head, or free floating munitions, much like the tungsten that comes out of the HIMARS rocket. HIMARS rocket.
Cluster bombs are munitions consisting of a projectile known as a parent munition that transports several hundred bomblets, or cluster munitions. Dropped by aircraft or launched from the ground, cluster bombs are designed to be dispersed over a wide area the size of several football pitches. As these weapons are generally free-falling, they can strike the ground a considerable distance from the target area if they're not used correctly.
These are even more dangerous than landmines.
For example, windy. In addition,
sometimes just moving them will make them blow up.
They thus become de facto anti-personnel mines, banned by the 1997 Ottawa Convention. Years after a conflict is over, they can
U.S. didn't sign that, neither did Russia.
Children attracted by their bright colors. By signing the Oslo Convention, more than 100 countries have pledged to clear contaminated areas, a long and dangerous task.
Yes, indeed. Now, part of learning about this stuff is being able to tell what it is that you can and cannot fuck with. Some of the grenades that have been popping up in Ukraine, they're from World War fucking II. Yeah. Like Lend-Lease type of stuff. Here's
US
one.
President Joe Biden has greenlit the delivery of cluster munition to Ukraine as a part of the new $800 million military aid package that will also include 32 M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and 32 Stryker armored personnel carriers, as well as new munition for various weapon systems like the Patriot or the HIMARS. The announced delivery of cluster munition is a bold move that was avidly welcomed and celebrated in Ukraine, but has raised a lot of eyebrows from different experts and international organizations. Welcome to Talking Tactics, where this week we want to put the delivery of cluster munition to Ukraine into perspective. Why is cluster munition such a controversial weapon? Why has Ukraine been asking for it for months? And what use will it actually be on the battlefield? First, how it works. The USA will deliver so-called dual-purpose improved conventional munitions, short DPICM, to Ukraine. DPICM is the name for a family of cluster munition that comes in different forms and sizes, such as artillery shells of various calibers, ranging from 105 to 155 millimeter and 203 millimeter howitzers, but also 227 millimeter artillery rockets that can be fired from the HIMARS multiple rocket launchers currently deployed in Ukraine. Regardless of these differences, all these shells and rockets are designed to function roughly in the same way. The shell or rocket is lined with unguided submunition, little cluster bombs if you will, also referred to as bomblets, which are roughly the size of a hand grenade and have a cloth ribbon attached at the top that helps stabilize it as it falls. They contain an armor-penetrating charge and steel fragments that scatter when the bomblet explodes. These
Alright, we're gonna pause this. Some of them are literally... Alright, if you look up the bazooka from World War II, some of these, what they're dropping, is literally one of those. One of the things out of a bazooka, except they're not attaching a rocket to it. It doesn't need it. It's just the explosive when it hits something. Now, if it hits soft mud, it might not explode. It might just sit there for years and years and years. Might rust away to nothing. As soon as that white phosphorus, as soon as it rusts away till that white phosphorus is hitting the oxygen, yeah, it lights right up. Because of all the white phosphorus that was used in our bombs in Vietnam, there's a lot of people that they'll hear explosions in the night and get up in the morning and basically just have to take care of a fire or take pictures of some of the craters and holes that are around their house. America dropped a lot of that stuff. I should probably try plugging these in and getting some power on them. My vehicle's running real rough because somebody put some sugar in the sumbitch, but I guess life happens, don't it?
Are typically released from the back end of the shell as it flies. It's called dual purpose, by the way, because it's supposed to be effective against troops, but also somewhat against more heavily armored targets like APCs or tanks. Depending on the exact type of DPICM munition and how it is employed, each shell can scatter a target area encompassing thousands of square meters. According to an article by the Warzone, a single M26 227mm artillery rocket can spread these fragments over a circle-shaped area 200 meters in diameter. That's an area of just over 31,000 square meters. Why is it so controversial? Well, in very simple terms, because cluster munition is meant to attack a larger area rather than a precise target, hard to calculate risk factors like non-military casualties increase drastically. In addition, these fragments, if they don't kill you, can cause nasty injuries. Another problem is that parts of these bomblets don't explode after being discharged. As a result, large areas of land become a potential minefield, posing a threat for years even after the end of whatever armed conflict. This so-called dud rate is especially high among Russian cluster munition, according to some sources even up to 40%. In past conflicts, US-fired cluster munition has also shown dud rates of over 20%. However, more modern DPICM, like the M864 artillery shells for 155mm howitzers, which contain 72 bomblets each, and according to the Washington Post are heading to Ukraine, have been attested at a dud rate of around 2.35% according to the US Ministry of Defense. Also, an option to limit potential damage to civilians or friendly fire is to mark any area that was targeted by cluster munition so it can be cleared directly after the end of the war. Nonetheless, the dangers posed by the use of cluster munition has caused over 108 countries to ratify the so-called Convention on Cluster Munition, condemning the use of most, but not all, types. However, the document was never signed by Russia, the USA, or Ukraine. Why does Ukraine want cluster munition? Ukraine has been asking for this munition for months. There is a severe lack of almost all types of ammunition right now, so to fulfill its goals in the counteroffensive, but also to defend its territories, Ukraine needs a lot more of everything. Although countries like the US and Germany have already stepped up their production capacities, it probably won't be enough, at least in short term. This brings us to the specific advantages of cluster munition. Republican members of Congress, in a joint letter calling for DPICM to be included in future aid for Ukraine that was sent to President Biden in March, noted that a single round can achieve a similar or greater operational effect as 5 or more rounds armed with GMLRS. So, in the end, it's not so much a matter of wanting than a matter of needing. A necessary drastic measure, if you will. Also, with Russian troops having dug deep trenches and fortifications over a 900-mile front line that has been static almost for months, cluster munition, due to the fact that it spreads in such a wide area and from above, is an effective way of combating troops that otherwise would have to be countered by storming trenches with infantry. A tedious and very deadly process. So, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Colin H. Kahl couldn't be more right when he said the Pentagon is providing these new capacities to meet the urgency of the moment.
One is the urgency of the moment, which is that, the Ukrainians are in the midst of their counteroffensive.
And don't be mistaken, there are no illusions on the Ukrainian side that cluster munition is a dangerous and powerful weapon. Since filming this episode, it was announced that the first deliveries of cluster munition have already arrived in Ukraine. In addition, Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov promised that this munition would only be used outside urban areas. But this is a country that's fighting for its survival, and risking its own reputation is something that Kyiv will only do if there really seems to be no other way. Thanks for watching Talking Tactics. Hit like and subscribe, and see you next week.
Now the ones from Myanmar, those ones are probably good ones to watch, because these guys talk about how making these weapons results in them and their loved ones being harmed or killed. It's not just the fear of enemy soldiers. It's the fact that 1 in 3 of these shots on these goddamn things results in the death of the user or severe injuries to the user. This video is primarily about people being injured. Making their own RPG-2s, making their own 60mm mortars. .40mm mortars as well. He's talking about deaths and people losing hands and fingers and their hearing. So they're trying to fight a war, but they're more likely to kill themselves than anyone else. Hamas just recently increased their own safety standards only because they have been able to upgrade some of their stuff. They've been able to do a lot of work underground, in some places 100 feet underground. Some of these manufacturing plants, and mind you, the rockets that they're making, they're 9 to 15 feet long, some of them. So I mean, these are big, they're heavy, and it takes a few people to even carry them or set them up. Well, they've gotten a little bit better safety standards, just like the folks in Myanmar, but they're still only able to get 2 to 3 shots out of their rifles. They're only able to get between 1 and 3 shots out of their RPG-2s. It blows up in their faces. And one of the big things that Americans are doing, and that the Vietnamese did, the Vietnamese knew that if they basically heat treated them, they'd probably get 2 shots out of an RPG-2. So when they made them knowing that they would only get 2 shots out of them, and then it was basically a throwaway weapon. And a lot of the ones in Myanmar are made out of exactly the same type of tubing. You can get the same tubing here in the United States even. I even have a section of the tubing in the back of my vehicle right now. But here's the thing. Mine's untreated. And even treated, you only get 2 to 3 shots out of it. Chances are pretty good that it'll kill the user. How intelligent are you for making such a thing? It's about the dumbest thing you can do. And I won't show you any of the injuries because I know that might get my channel in trouble. Some of those injuries are pretty morbid. Sometimes I try to find one that I think might be clean enough to show you, but they're so gruesome. Even the quote-unquote mild ones, they're so gruesome, or they show corpses, and that's just gross to most people. And y'all are offended by that too. Well, I'm offended more by the fact that somebody made a corpse than I am by the fact that there is a corpse. I'm disgusted by the fact that somebody's dead more so than the fact that somebody's showing the dead. See, this one's about guerrilla warfare in Myanmar. God, this is some scary shit.
In a camp in central Myanmar, a former policeman gives his full concentration to his task. He's making a gun, something he learned by watching videos online.
The plus point about making our own weapons is we don't have to spend a lot of money buying guns, but it takes a lot of time. We have to be extremely careful. It can be dangerous for us if we are careless.
He's part of an armed resistance group known as the People's Defense Force, or PDF. It's made up of people from all walks of life, united in one goal: fighting the junta. They've given up jobs and left their homes and families behind to live in camps like this. Here they train, plan, and carry out counterattacks on security forces. They say they're aware of the risks and know they are outgunned by a military force that's used artillery fire and airstrikes on civilians. But the fighters know they can count on the support of many people in Myanmar.
I feel like they're our strength during our struggle. They protect us from army dogs. The junta forces torch villages even though there aren't any armed fighters there.
Resistance groups have also stepped in to provide services disrupted by the fighting. A nurse who quit her job in a military hospital to join the civil disobedience movement last year conducts basic health checks on people from villages. More than a year after the coup in February 2021, resistance against the military government is still strong. Small protests, like this one in a village in neighboring Sagaing region, take place from time to time. They may not be enough to overturn the military government, but the message they send is loud and clear. Florence Louis, Al Jazeera.
Yep. There's a lot of that kind of stuff.
切里面多了，不老板这个要切下来，用得习惯这个，每天嘛切来切习惯，老板你小来来话切路。
Man, more rebels risking life and limb. Instead of having actual shrapnel in there that's metal ball bearings, they're just using pieces of crushed rock. Pretty scary. There's also a lot of people here in the United States talking about making their own weapons. There's certain parts that you have to do right. The barrel on anything needs to be done right, or you're running the risk of killing yourself and those around you. Now for me, there's a lot of people that are quote-unquote crazy that I end up dealing with. And they're not necessarily bad people. Some of them just have severe mental problems. Some of them have drug addictions. Some of them are on the wrong damn pharmaceuticals. Some of them are on pharmaceuticals they don't need, and it makes them crazy. And some of them do need to be on pharmaceuticals. Now here's one of the mines that if you go over to Ukraine, you might have to try to figure out how to disarm. By the way, this one's pretty easy. You'd be surprised. Basically, it flips up in the air and shoots the goddamn thing from the top, where the armor's the weakest. It's supposed to be able to go through almost 900 centimeters of rolled homogeneous armor, or 600 centimeters of, not millimeters, but centimeters of modern hardened armor with modified composite. Now the ones you're most likely to find are models of Bouncing Betty, the World War II German S-mine.
During the 1930s, German engineers developed the classic self-contained anti-personnel mine. Called the shrapnel mine, or S-mine, it was a deadly adversary and became one of the definitive weapons of World War II.
You notice it has these three prongs. So what you did was you buried this in so that only those three prongs stick above the ground. And if they're disturbed in any way, this thing will go off. And what happens is, this thing is propelled upward. So this bounds up about waist level. and then it explodes. And these ball bearings that are all the way around come flying out and act as the casualty producing vehicle. And it's
So let's look at it this way for those of you who absolutely hate me. Now, if we've got a choice between some innocent child getting blown up by one of our government's, ours or someone else's cluster munitions, let's say in 5 to 25 years, someone's kid is going to happen across it and blow up and end up dead. Now, between that child dying in the future, or someone like me possibly dying in the process of disarming that shit, wouldn't you much rather that I get blown up instead of a child in the future? Anywhere between 40 and 100,000 people per year are killed by landmines and other unexploded munitions. Over 50% of them in post-war areas. That means it's a conflict that is long since past. The war is no longer in progress. The war is over. Over 50% of those killed are children, because, you know, you see this antique out there. It's real cool looking. It's a bomb looking thing. And you pick it up and it's a real fucking bomb. You can learn about all these different things. Like this one right here, the German S-mine. There's a lot of different ones to learn about. Cluster munitions are probably some of the scariest. We could show the two types of cluster munitions primarily favored by the Allies in World War II. One of which was British, and it dropped thermite. What's that, you might ask? It's basically aluminum and iron mixed with some other stuff to make it light on fire and get really super hot and basically melt stuff. Real scary shit. But you could put it out with water. You could not put it out with sand or dirt. You had to use water. That's because aluminum, as soon as it's exposed to air, it starts to become an oxide immediately. And iron oxide is iron combined with oxygen. So basically it gives itself its own oxygen for a bit. And then of course they had a magnesium case, and these were based on German bombs too. Just that the Americans and the English manufactured theirs in a very specific shape. Matter of fact, they built them exactly like this box right here. This shape here. Oh damn, I just dumped out all of my incense. I guess I'm probably not going to have good enough light to show you, but it's hexagonal. And that way they'd stack on top of each other. Let's see. Someone on himself, Random Boy Vlogs, type, hey, did you buy a new computer, Sean? War Crimes, Russia. No, I didn't buy a new computer. I'm fucking broke, dude. I'm doing this with my telephone. Having a computer doesn't make any difference. I can't afford to live on the amount of money that I get each month. And with the abuse that I've had to endure, and what it's done to me on paper, not being allowed to show evidence or face my accusers, being denied all of the rights that Americans are supposedly supposed to have. Yeah, my life ain't good. And my belief in Americans is non-existent at this point. I can't believe that any American's going to do the right thing. I can believe they'll do nice things. That's not a problem. There's a lot of people I know that are nice. But a lot of times, used car salesmen are nice, aren't they? What's somebody's incentive? What's their reason for doing what they're doing? When it comes to inactive munitions, that being flechettes, yeah, by all means, fucking go ahead. That shit is not a problem. Once it's in the ground, it's going to rot away, usually very quickly, because it's not generally very big. All you're doing is putting some iron into the soil, basically, over time. But active munitions, the stuff that goes boom, that's a no-no. And they say it's banned by international law. No, it's just that a lot of countries signed a piece of paper saying that they won't personally use it, Scouts honor and all that bullshit. Reality is, they end up in a situation like with Ukraine, they very well might go, you know what? Fuck you, Russia's using that shit on us, we're using it back. Now, them youngins throwing fireworks at me, if you recognize the paper or the size of the firework, you realize that even if they held it in their hand, they're not going to do a whole lot of damage. It's not going to blow off their whole hand. It's just going to blow out parts of it. But them youngins shouldn't be doing that shit. I've literally got everything in the car right now to make a fence stretcher. That's for chain link fence. Now, some people have tried to give me this great and wonderful idea of, hey man, are you trying to make a rocket launcher? Are you trying to blow people up? Like, fuck, man. No. If I wanted to blow people up, I wouldn't go fucking telling people about it. I wouldn't go buying this shit from, well, places that I tell you that I bought it at. My YouTube channel is full of stuff that I bought and where I bought it. I don't hide none of it. I've got sulfur. Absolutely. I've also got potassium nitrate. Absolutely. And I've made my own charcoal. Hardwood charcoal, though. It's different. Plus, it's not vented charcoal. What that means is that there's certain stuff that is a derivative when you use heartwood, which is what I prefer to use. Because when you use heartwood, there's a lot of stuff that's inside of it, like turpentine and shit, that if you have a container that you're making your charcoal in, and then you've got a container underneath it, and you've got a few holes in it, then all of those liquids, and they are liquids at that temperature, drip out. However, if you don't do that, that stuff gets hard, like crumbly hard. You smash it with a hammer and it will literally shatter. So I mean, it's only a liquid when you heat it up. Now, the thing about making charcoal where you don't drain it like that is that a lot of that stuff will actually seat itself inside of your charcoal, and it prevents your charcoal from being able to do what it is that you want it to do, which is activate. Basically, what you've done is, instead of having charcoal, which is a bunch of open cells that are made and comprised primarily of carbon, what it is it's those carbon meshings, but it's basically, how do I explain it?
Those cells are filled in with sap, with tree sap, with turpentine, with tree rosin, with all the different things that you can harvest. You can even get kerosene that way, by the way. A lot of people, when they think World War III, they think, what weapons would I like to have? What weapons would I like to have? And I think to myself, man, what could I use for fuel? And if I ran out of fuel, what could I use to make my own fuel? How would I carry it? How would I move it? If an area became unsafe, how much of it could I take with me and how much could I replace easily? A lot of people, when they put together a go bag, that's for in case of major issue, World War III type scenarios, zombie apocalypse or whatever. Let's say it's just a localized terrorist attack. Let's say some group in Montana decides that it doesn't like people in Texas. Well, they're not going to last long in Texas, are they? Probably not. Everybody's fucking armed. So you might go after somebody who's an ally of Texas. Who knows? The point is that whether you're in Dallas or San Antonio or Tillamook, Oregon, they might find any excuse to say that you're supporting someone. Tillamook sells cheese all over the place. Let's say they sell cheese in Dallas, Texas, and somebody's got a grudge against a store in Dallas, Texas, but they don't want to get busted. They might do some crazy shit up here. You never know what kind of screwed up scenario is going to happen. Maybe a tsunami comes up the West Coast and eats up the majority of the West Coast, including Tillamook County, and you got people who can't eat any of the food that they grew because it's all saturated in salt water. They can't eat any of the cows because they've been sitting out in a floodplain for a week and a half dead. Sometimes shit happens. But that go bag is pretty important. It's pretty important to have more than one, just in case of a completely different type of scenario. You're going to need different gear in a flood than you're going to need in a fire. That's for certain. Some of it will be the same. You still need fresh water. You might still need the ability to start your own fire for warmth. You definitely need different types of shelter, though. A lot of what I educate in is how to survive on garbage. And it can be done. A lot of the places where they have an abundance of garbage, it's because they have burn bans in those places. Also, with the number of people who have been lighting homeless encampments on fire, it's real scary to have any kind of a fire out here. Which is only part of the reason that so many people freeze to death out on the streets. A lot of people in the Gaza Strip are complaining that they're becoming homeless again. Welcome to America. Welcome to being poor in America. When you're out on the streets, that's it. You're a refugee in the United States of America. United States of America, people are more likely to help you as a Palestinian or help a Jew displaced by Hamas than they are to help their own citizens in a meaningful such way. Now let's take a look at, of course, often we bring up Dresden, but we don't mention that Tokyo firebombing, the same thing we did in Dresden, we did in Tokyo. And what happened when we did it in Tokyo? Well, the most death from a single night's bombing ever in the history of humanity, before or since, including the atomic bombs, was actually these nasty bastards. These ones, the difference between American cluster bombs and British cluster bombs is that British cluster bombs were filled with thermite, which I already explained you could put out with water. Americans filled theirs and they looked almost identical. Same exact size. They'd fit in the same exact container. Yep, Americans were filled with napalm. What happens if you pour water on napalm? It flares up and spits out. It doesn't put out the fire, it only spreads it. The stuff that's sticky, that's hot, sits on top of the water, it floats, and the water carries it quicker away from wherever it's at. The flames are still shooting out. It's still a bad fucking idea. Everybody knows that petroleum-based products float on top of water because it's lighter than water. Yep, it's a bad fucking idea. Plus, there's the white phosphorus in it. That's meant to help spread the petroleum jelly.
Component of the M69 bomb, a cheesecloth sock containing specially processed jellied gasoline. When ignited, the gel filling becomes a clinging fiery mass spreading more than a yard in diameter. It burns at approximately 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 to 10 minutes. The bomb was developed by the National Defense Research Council in collaboration with the Chemical Warfare Service. In a demonstration, it is fired electrically from the ground against a wall. For airdrops, the M69 is assembled in groups
That's
of
only
38.
3 of them.
The
There's 38
E-23
per
adapter
ground.
is used in forming 500-pound aimable clusters carried by planes equipped to handle this size bomb. On the assembly line at Mays Landing, New Jersey, the bombs are secured inside the cylindrical halves of the cluster wall.
How easily could
Bomb is held
Hamas make
together by
these?
9 steel straps attached to release buckles, which are broken open by time fuses within the...
They could literally just take the measurements and flat sheet metal and literally make these entire things themselves. They could start manufacture of cluster munitions in under an hour. That's not a joke. It wouldn't take jack shit for them to start. And that's one of the problems with their underground munitions factories and plants. Sure, what they're making is complete and total jack shit. And yeah, making an RPG-2 or an RPG-7 out of that shit's a real bad fucking idea. And it takes a lot of time for all you're getting out of it. Which includes the death of the person who's using it. I mean, those things are dangerous as hell. That's why the Russians made sure they used proper metallurgy when they made them. The same thing with the Bulgarians. Same thing with the Chinese to some degree. However, the Vietnamese used just seamed pipe, welded seam on it, no less. The same stuff we use as conduit here in the United States. It's exactly the same thing. It's literally made in Vietnam. And Myanmar is using that same tubing. And the same thing with these folks in the Middle East. It's all made in Vietnam. It's all 40 millimeter. It all has to be bored out by scrubbing the internal zinc off. It's the same stuff that they use for setting up posts and signs. The ones for the cities all over America. It's dangerous. It'll get you killed if you try making weapons out of it. Other than melee weapons, and even then, if you hit yourself with it, there's a possibility of giving yourself an injury that'll kill you, or an infection that'll kill you.
An assembly. The clusters are given low altitude tests at Edgewood Arsenal with a B-25 loading the 500-pounders. canister is released and opened, and the individual bombs with gauze streamers trailing drop toward the target. On impact, an M1 fuse detonates the ejection charge, which ignites and hurls the gel filling from the tail of the bomb. Another drop of the jellied gasoline bombs. The M69 saw extensive use in the March fire raids on Tokyo and Nagoya.
And Dresden. See all those
There is
white things
also the
hopping up in the air?
M47 containing about the same type incendiary material, but packaged as a 100-pound.
I believe it was an artillery shell, but I'm not for certain. Alright, now let's do British WW2 incendiary cluster. Alright. We're looking for the British version. This is the very first cluster munition, the butterfly bomb, Germany, World War II. These two are German, part of the body, the main body there. It's got a cast iron weight at the very end of it, and then it's got a magnesium fuselage, and then the tail is usually just some sort of sheet steel. Alright, the Dresden ones.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Armourer's Bench. Today I'm here with Paul of the Dunkirk 1940 Museum, a good friend, and he's going to tell us about a really interesting incendiary bomb. So, what have we got here for?
This incendiary bomb is actually a British incendiary bomb. Now, most houses around the UK, most people of a certain age will be familiar with the German type, because most houses used to have one somewhere around that was sort of discarded or made safe.
Sorry if we can't hardly hear it.
Now, due to the nature of obviously not dropping these things on ourselves, not many people in the UK have actually seen British incendiary bomb. No, I never have. The same sort of principle basically applies. It's a magnesium body that you ignite, and that is what transfers the flame and sets the fires going. Now, in common with its German counterparts, you've got a very heavy metal end that's designed to smash through the tiles and roofs and obviously enter the roof space. Roof spaces on houses obviously are quite dry places, so they're ideal for sort of starting fires. Now, they come in bundles, they're hexagonal in shape, so they actually connect together and fit more perfectly into a drop canister.
The Germans are round, aren't they?
They are, quite stubby and round, and the difficulty with that is you've got a lot of dead space in that canister, and you could have got more bombs.
Now we're going to pause here for a moment, because there is one great thing about the round ones, and this is something that was not exploited by the Germans, is that you can pack all that area in between with flechettes, or flechettes. However, you can pack them together as clusters like this, and then have the outer casing so that it's stuffed with the flechettes. When the outer casing opens up, it's open at the front and the rear, and that'll allow the flechettes to fall. So, of course, there's multiple ways of making, of course, the flechettes being the inactive, and the incendiary bombs here being the active.
When that actually impacts its target, that is what actually does the detonation. Right. With the British one, it's when that stack of packed incendiary bombs separates. There's a little button here, and that just pops out, and that is what activates the bomb. So these things are actually already alight by the time they actually hit the building. So if there's sufficient velocity and weak enough tile that it actually hits, it could start firing the loft space, smash through the ceiling of the room below, and continue right the way down until it obviously either runs out of velocity or hits something it can't get through. So it could basically, if you've got, say, a 5-story building of single use, it could smash practically all the way down to ground level, setting fire as it goes.
The New Zealand National Archives has this great clip from 1942 talking about the very type of incendiary bomb that we're looking at and its effects.
Fire.
This is a British type of 4-pound incendiary bomb. To help it penetrate a roof, it has a heavy cast iron nose. It has a light metal tail containing the firing mechanism. And the body of the bomb is a magnesium alloy casing containing thermite. The hexagonal bombs pack together closely, and bombing planes drop them in showers. If one of these bombs should arrive on your floor through roof and ceiling, the thermite inside will soon start burning. The best thing to do with it is to pick it up by the base, rush it outside, and drop it into water. Now we'll watch another one that's not dealt with. The thermite's burning inside the core, but the bomb could easily be picked up and thrown out. Now, after 20 seconds, the magnesium alloy casing is beginning to melt and burn with a white glare. Now a fire is starting. At this stage, the incendiary firework could be put out with a hose or buckets. After about a minute and a half, the fire is spreading. Hot particles of metal fly about. Curtains catch fire. Wallpaper and scrim get going. So within 2 or 3 minutes, there is a fire that endangers the whole house and perhaps neighboring houses. A fire that under emergency conditions may cause loss of life.
You hear about
Indeed.
counts, people throwing sand buckets over incendiaries, don't you?
It's the most effective is to just simply cut off the oxygen supply. If you don't cut the oxygen, you can try water, all that's going to do is obviously just spread it. The fire will just spread because of what's burning. There's a small charge in there, as I say, when that piece lifts up, there's a small charge, that sets fire to the magnesium. And then the magnesium obviously burns with the ferocity. We all remember the school experiments when they light the little strips. Well, look at this for a strip. That's going to burn quite ferociously.
So where was this found?
This was actually dropped on Dresden on the night of the firestorm.
Oh my word.
Yeah.
There's some clips from the actual bombing of Dresden from a staff film report produced by the US Army Signal Corps Army Pictorial Service.
They dropped both types on Dresden. Napalm type from the Americans.
We've got a couple of German ones in our collection in the Museum of the Cabinets, which were dropped on Coventry.
And also the British ones that were dropped by the thermate ones. So one of them had a thermate-based incendiary, which could be put out with water. And one of them had a petroleum-based incendiary that was spread by water. And they both looked the same. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons that they dropped both types and that they made them look the same and dropped them from the same containers. You didn't know which one you'd encountered. Now, by the time they went and bombed Tokyo, it was pretty much the napalm type. Almost everybody decided that that was the better of the two. Why would you bother with trying to confuse people over whether or not they can put water on it? When they realize they can't put water on it, maybe they'll try to get the hell out of there instead of trying to fight a fire that they can't possibly fight. Cluster munitions are bad, real bad. America gave cluster munitions to Ukraine, and we knew they were gonna. And we were certain that Ukraine was going to use them to attach to their drones and drop them one at a time. But no, that's not what they're doing. They're using them in a way inconsistent with international agreements. Oh wait, but they weren't a part of that international agreement and did not agree to it. So, is it really international law or is it international fucking assholes? Oh, there's anti-LGBT stuff. $5 grand, ain't it? Yeah, they pulled right behind my vehicle to do that. As you could hear, there was other people in the parking lot that didn't like it either. Someone calling themselves Manland typed, "Did you pray today?" Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. No, obviously, they're still finding these firebombs. I was watching one report said the most recent one they found was in 2009. Then there was another article I was reading that said they found one in 2018 in Great Britain. Hanging from it was right above a sink in like an old little bay window type of thing that was used as a wash bin area. And it had been sealed up in this attic since the 1940s. And they went in there and they saw it just dangling there from a piece of the framing. And then I saw another one that they found a cluster of like 3 of them in a barn. And then there was another one where they found some that somebody had gone out and collected them and gone and put them in their barn behind some rafters in Great Britain. Some in other parts of Europe. Most of the time it's when we see the ones that they find in Great Britain, it's the ones that are around, the German type. But if you take a look at the ones that he was showing in that video, the Dresden incendiary bombs, they're all hexagonal, same as the ones that were dropped on Tokyo. Like I said, they knew exactly what they were doing when they dropped that shit on Tokyo. They knew the human price, the human cost. They also knew by that point what incendiary objects did, what fire did. I mean, we'd already known for literally probably tens of thousands of years of humans killing other humans what it is that fire does. Fire burns. And that's just an evil thing to do to somebody. Anyway, I'm used to these youngins being shitheads. I'm used to them making loud noises at all hours of the day and night. Honking at me, fucking with me, throwing pumpkins at me, throwing fireworks at me. Now, that guy that ultimately ended up just going through and thrashing a bunch of things, yeah, his name is Ryan Corrigan Woods. And what did he do the other day? Well, he apparently was arrested at a church for tearing shit up. And then him and another guy went driving around. They went and stole some vehicles and stole a forklift and drove through some vehicles and then went out to the Air Museum and drove a vehicle through the doors. And sprayed a, what do you call that? Fire extinguisher and yeah, I know that guy. Matter of fact, I had some of my stuff over at his place for like 3 days. I had it there one day and they were already fucking with it. Second day, still fucking with it. I'm glad I got it out of there because I could tell something fucked up was going to happen if they kept messing around like that. Meanwhile, I get sent to those kind of people for help from the quote-unquote professionals. When you're sending me to active users as peer support, and I'm not an active user, and frankly never was. Don't get me wrong, I tried methamphetamines many years ago, over 2 decades ago. Don't get me wrong, I did smoke my fair share of marijuana, and don't get me wrong, up until 2001, I did drink like a fish. Anyway, there's a reason I was showing you the Dresden incendiary bomb and also the American M69 cluster munition because they fired exactly the same size ammunition. Matter of fact, you could mix and match the ammo. You could make a cluster a little bit of both. Now, you could sort of put out the American ones. You notice how the British ones, how they drop through and they're just on fire. But the Americans drop through and then they explode and kick a big old bag of petroleum jelly out on fire. Yeah, that drops through your roof. The American one drops through your roof, explodes halfway through your house, kicks that petroleum jelly bag all over the inside, and of course it's hot, so it's drippy and melty. It gets a lot less viscous, and it still sticks to everything. So the American one is a lot scarier. Now they showed firing 3 of them in a row for the American ones, and you got to see the results of that. Like it sort of lit the dark colored fabric they had against the wall on fire a little bit, but if you watch it for a minute, it'll show you a cascade of that going down the wall. Like it lights it on fire, gets all of it lit up in just a matter of moments. Now, also when you look at that, you look at the fact that the targets they're shooting at are probably about 30 to 60 yards away, and it's up high. And if something like that goes through your roof, it's not going to shoot that perfectly through the hole that it just came through. As soon as that bag of petroleum crap comes out, it starts spreading out and basically makes it look like almost like a half-size basketball in a gym bag. When that blows out, it's not going to go back through the, 2.5-inch hole that it came through. If it hits that hole perfectly, it's still going to splatter on the ceiling, and it's going to splatter all of that inside of the house instantly. And, of course, it's going to drip through. Those things are dangerous. Then we start getting into the difference between offensive and defensive munitions. Inside versus outside type of explosives. Like, for example, thermobaric, you use that when you're going for soft targets. Soft targets is a way of saying a human most of the time. But a thermobaric is for a soft target inside of a building. Or in an enclosed area like a canyon. The less of an area that it has for the concussive force to exit, the more likely it is to kill the occupants by something called overpressure. Basically, the air pressure around you squishes your body and breaks a bunch of shit internally. You can look just fine on the outside. There's a lot of people that during World War II, they found them dead after, internal explosions happened in their houses or in their bunkers even, pillboxes and things like that, if it was big enough, that it didn't look like there was a single thing wrong with them. There was no bleeding externally, no bruising, no shrapnel, not even through their clothes, but they were dead. But also there was the telltale signs and giveaways with a lot of the other people found dead with them, like bleeding out of the eyes, bleeding out of the ears, bleeding out of the nose, bleeding out of the mouth. It's some real nasty shit. We took a look at all the fire. That's the scariest part to civilians, by the way. That's the reason that America is one of several countries that refuses to sign a piece of paper saying that they're not going to use firebombs anymore. The only reason for firebombs is to intimidate and scare the hell out of civilian populations. Although it also has the added effect of inflicting damage and losses, but that's part of the intimidation factor. Y'all been burned before. It doesn't go away, it doesn't stop, it just keeps burning and burning and burning and burning until it heals. And even as it's healing, it burns and it burns and it burns and it burns. It's an easy way to get addicted to medications and still be in pain, constantly. Now there's cluster and explosives munitions. This is what we primarily use now, isn't it? For example, that M14 toe jammer bomb. It doesn't even have any real shrapnel to speak of. It's a plastic casing and a chunk of metal that's part of the primer, but I mean, really, the majority of the shrapnel is parts of your own foot. Concussive grenades, that's for storming settlements or storming buildings. And then you've got fragmentation grenades, and that's for outside. It's a lot more difficult to kill somebody with concussion outside because it doesn't reverberate. But you can actually use explosives to literally shake a person to death. A lot of the stuff that I'm interested in doing is learning how to take apart a lot of these old mines and a lot of these old clusters. And I don't know, I don't like people. I think they're horrible. I don't want to be anywhere near them. But I also don't want them getting killed. And I especially don't want children getting killed. Just because adults are horrible doesn't mean the kids should have to pay for it. But they do, don't they? Between 40 and 100,000 people a year are killed by landmines. 40 and 100,000. That would be 40,000 and 100,000, sorry. And that's not to mention the number of people who have lost limbs. I believe it's either the Philippines or possibly Myanmar. Could be Thailand as well. 1 in 243 people have lost a limb to a landmine. That's a lot. That's actually a lot. How many Americans have lost a limb to a landmine? What percentage of our population? Anyway, it's Friday night, and it's 10:05 p.m., which means them youngins are gonna be out and about fucking around longer. Somebody's typing at me on the channel. Someone calling themselves Jerry Grassel typed, bro, what are you live streaming? What are you live streaming? What is the slide string about? W Ridge. And then Lighthouse is typing, would you fancy a piece of coffee cake? Lighthouse made another profile to get on here and harass me. Lighthouse, I'm gonna block every one of your profiles so you get on here and keep typing that coffee cake shit. I started recording this video because some youngins threw some fireworks at my vehicle. Definitely not a cool thing to do. However, one of the things that I've been weighing on heavily is that here in the United States, these fucking people are completely ungoddamn grateful for the fact that I exist. There are things I'm able to do, but I gotta know that people are just gonna leave me the fuck alone and let me do it. Just leave me the fuck alone and let me exist. I hear about what Palestinians are going through, and I feel bad for them. I really do. But here in America, we got a permanent state of crisis ourselves. And our homeless out here are being murdered in record numbers. 0.18% of our population are homeless. However, 61% of those killed by police last year were homeless. Yeah. God damn it. Yeah. That is the nastiest goddamn way to smoke tobacco. This channel is for speaking up about victimization, especially victimization by predators within our own governments and our own families. Who are the people most likely to victimize us? Those who hold dominion over us or believe that they hold dominion over us. If they can call you mentally ill, they can pretend that you're crazy. If they can pretend that you're crazy, they can prevent you from being heard. Now, Lighthouse, why did you make another account? You're not going to help me turn any of this in. You're not going to help me turn in the situation with Natalie Bollinger or the reality of it. You're just going to get on here and fucking type about coffee cake. Well, I hope coffee cake helps you. To answer the other gentleman's questions, it's complicated. I made this channel after my best friend got her brains blown out in 2016. The thing is, we hadn't been friends for a while by that point. Oh, shit. This thing might not start. Alright, I'll let it sit for a minute. Anyway, I figured with the youngins here, been throwing stuff at me and throwing stuff at my vehicle and beating on my vehicle and throwing, well, it's technically an explosive device that they're throwing at my vehicle in the Safeway parking lot. But really, who wants to be that much of a dick to a youngin' who's just, kids will be kids, as that one guy said. Well, no, this is far beyond just being kids. This is being obnoxious little knockheads. A lot of people pretend like I have no idea what racism is because of the color of my skin. I grew up in the system. Also, you can hear on my channel how many times I get called the N-word. I got a question. How many of y'all black folk are called the N-word as often as I am publicly? Even if we just count the number of times just in the last year, just recorded, it's more than most of y'all. There was one black man here in town. He says, you know, I've never really had to deal with any racism in this town for the most part. Just one time back in school. But then when I was telling him about all the N-word that I had to hear, he was like, oh yeah, I have to hear that from time to time, yeah. They just scream it at random. Like, yo. Well, they scream it at random a lot more to me than you guys, it seems. German parachute mines. Oh. Alright, so the cluster munition that goes into the M69 cluster bomb, it's called the M62. M62 cluster munition. Ukraine has started using US provided cluster munitions. That's not what we're looking for. Right now, it's the Mark 20 Rockeye 2 cluster bombs that Ukraine wanted. We actually have the Mark 3 now that we use. Let's see. Alright, I guess it's not going to show it. Anyways, you could probably tell. Oh, sorry. This is World War II footage of them assembling it. This is what it looks like in a Tokyo museum. They're the first napalm bombs, really.
Bombings in Europe and Asia during World War II were incredibly destructive. But what exactly is a firebomb? One used by the United States was the M69 incendiary bomb, right here. It was about 20 inches long and 3 inches wide, and they packed 38 of them together to make a cluster bomb. At about 2,000 feet, the cluster bombs would release their bombs, and each had a cotton streamer to help point the fuse down so it would detonate on impact. And when it did, each bomblet would send napalm up to 100 feet in every direction, instantly starting fires. A single B-29 could carry 40 of these bombs. That's over 1,500 bomblets per plane. Fire bombings in Europe and Asia during World War II were incredibly destructive.
By the way, they could carry twice that amount. They just wouldn't have had enough fuel to get there. You have to sacrifice the weight somewhere. If they'd have been closer, they could have used a whole lot more. Lessons learned in the firebombing of
mankind's
Tokyo.
unthinkable weapon. But would it surprise you to know that conventional weapons can be just as deadly? I'm Jim Lindsay, and this is Lessons Learned. Our topic today is Operation Meeting House, the U.S. firebombing of Tokyo on March 9th and 10th, 1945. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 left the United States reeling in the Pacific. The U.S. military lacked the capacity to bring the war to Japan in a sustained way. In April 1942, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle did lead an air raid on Japan. The attack gave Americans a much-needed morale boost by showing
Pretty
the
fucking
Japanese
ineffective,
homeland
though.
was not invulnerable. However, Doolittle's raid did little damage to Japan itself. Instead of taking the fighting immediately to Japan, U.S. forces spent the first 3 years after Pearl Harbor island hopping in the Pacific. At places like Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Saipan, U.S. sailors, soldiers, and Marines slowly rolled back Japanese control. By late 1944, the United States had advanced far enough that the new U.S. bomber, the B-29, could reach Tokyo on a regular basis. The first U.S. bombing raids did minor damage, so U.S. bomber pilots developed new tactics. They flew low and at night. They also began to use incendiary bombs against Japanese cities, which were largely constructed of wood. These tactics came to their horrific culmination in Operation Meeting House. 334 B-29s dropped 2,000 tons of bombs. The attack unleashed a rare firestorm that fed on itself. Temperatures reached an estimated 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. 15 square miles of Tokyo, equivalent to half of Manhattan, were burned out. No one knows for sure how many people died in the firebombing of Tokyo. The estimates range from 90,000 to well more than 100,000. That is a death toll equal to, if not higher than, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A reporter for the New York Times simply wrote, "The heart of Tokyo is gone." The bombings didn't stop in Tokyo. They continued for the
Up
next
to
5 months.
210,000
Japan
people.
surrendered in the wake of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Some 1 million Japanese died, the vast majority because of conventional bombing attacks. What is the lesson of the firebombing of Tokyo? Just this: the danger of nuclear weapons should not blind us to the destructive power of conventional weapons. The Rwandan genocide of 1994 killed more than 500,000 people. Many of the victims died in machete attacks. An estimated 100,000 people have died in the violence that has rocked Iraq since the U.S. invasion in 2003. Perhaps 50,000 people died in fighting last year in Libya. The death toll from war often reaches far beyond the battlefield. The fighting that has raged in the eastern Congo since 1998 has killed an estimated 6 million people. Many of the victims died of malnutrition and disease, problems that can become rampant when violence destroys any semblance of law and order. The destructive power of conventional weapons is not a reason to never use military force. It is a reason to consider their use carefully and not to underestimate their consequences. The destructive power of conventional weapons is also a reason why countries have a responsibility to protect civilian populations where they can. Here's a question to consider. What more should the international community be doing to prevent conventional warfare? I encourage you to weigh in with your answers on my blog, The Water's Edge, which you can find at CFR.org. I'm Jim Lindsay. Thank you for watching this installment of Lessons Learned.
That's one of the things about being a historian and understanding history and context. There's a lot of shit that I get wrong. There really is.
Conventional bombs demand pinpoint accuracy. But targeting by sight is tricky. Americans often drop several bombs and hope one hits the mark. During the Battle of Tinian, officers gather on Saipan to watch this film. It shows the field testing of a new type of weapon. It's called napalm, a combustible mixture of sticky gel and fuel designed to spread and burn. Americans have no problem using fire. It's already pouring out of flamethrowers and tanks. But this is a whole new level of destruction. Now, the airplane can become a dragon. One breath can set a bridge ablaze. Set water on fire.
Yeah.
Or turn a field of green earth into a lifeless, charred dead zone where no one can hide.
Fire is scary shit.
After watching this film, the brass on Saipan don't hesitate. They order 8,500 pounds of it. Inside of a year, America's use of napalm in the Pacific will spread like wildfire.
Anyway, because of the harassment that I've endured since the death of Natalie Bollinger, and before, as I've said many times, if I was able to record 24/7, I would. With them youngins throwing fireworks at my vehicle or getting up behind me and using the loudest fucking horn that they possibly could just to be dickheads. I started this video because of one of those instances. And of course I've showed the chunks of the firework. I deal with this shit a lot. Because I'm a guy, I'm expected to take care of it myself. And cops are kind of dickheads to me. The cops have not historically been good to men in this country, especially who are homeless. And of course, the general public just wants to assume that men are the bad guys, and that's resulted in a lot of my friends ending up dead, including committing suicide over long-term abuse. Alright, hopefully I can get my car started. Let's see what happens. Nope. See if I give it a few extra minutes. I knew this was gonna happen if I used my car to keep my stuff charged. With some of them youngins putting gas in my gas, or sugar in my gas tank. I'm sure that ain't no good. By the way, you can get potassium nitrate from urine and dirt, just so you know. If you ever have to make your own black powder, or your own sugar rockets, also known as R candy. But my recommendation is, if you're going to use something like that as an insurgent, make it an IED. Basically doing what Hamas was doing, except not having a human being do it. Fucking stupid. Do it from a distance via remote control, like the Ukrainians are doing, and the Russians are doing. But then again, what are we doing at the end of the day? Same thing as always. It doesn't matter if it's swords, knives, machetes, sticks, fucking rocks, napalm, nails with fins, and we'll call them fletchets. It don't fucking matter. People are still gonna do horrible shit. Alright, now due to my booty having stuff trying to show itself, I'm gonna be using some Halloween stuff that I got last year to try to cover my booty a little more appropriately. It'll look kind of like a strong, but shit, it's better than showing people my asshole, right? Hopefully, I'll be able to find somebody to either help me push my car or, we'll see, I guess. Maybe jump it. Oh, a lighter. Cool.
I was hoping there'd be some decent sized tractors back here. Pretty much everybody who's homeless has already been walked by 400 times looking for them all, and again, so have I. Sometimes I find some underneath the signs or behind the garbage cans, which is pretty cool, but not today. Checking most of the corners where I usually find them, but again, not today. This channel, I did want it to be for all of the victims, to be able to get their voices heard, but without a place to do it. You know, my predators, a lot of them, they did the evil shit that they did just to make a profit, just to make a little bit extra money by selling a false narrative, but nobody gave a shit if it was true or not. They had somebody to crucify, and god damn it, they were gonna do it. I gotta deal with that bullshit everywhere I go. Ain't no such thing as a good cop. Anyway, I got enough on my food stamp card to go get something else to eat, so I'm gonna go do that. I was hoping to find a tobacco stick.
Welcome. If you have your club card, $1.79. If you have your club card, please scan it now. Your card has been accepted. How many store-provided bags did you? Your total is 1, and your savings is 20 cents. Please wait. System processing. Follow the instructions on the pin pad.
All right.
So she's not going to go take an hour back now? She's not going to go take it. She's not going to take hours back
Please remember to take your receipt. Thank you. Welcome. If you have your club card, please scan it now. Scan items one time, placing them in the bagging area after each scan. For items without barcodes, touch the quick lookup button. Welcome. If you have your club card, please.
I brought Skinner here.
Did I break it?
Hey Scott, you wouldn't happen to have a cigarette you could sell me, would you? Damn. That's alright. I don't have any rolling papers, or I'd just try rolling up some snipes, but I'm pretty low on them too. Damn. Alright. Do what? Alright. Well, I guess I'll walk to a couple places I know are quasi-dry sometimes and see if there's anything there. Thanks, Scott. What the hell is this? Easter grass with confetti. Oh. That was just 6 cents, I guess. Excuse me, would either of you two gentlemen have a cigarette you'd be willing to sell for $1? That'll work.
My buddy's got one here that's not, it's a, commercially a real one, they call them.
Well, here's $1 for it. Like I said, I'll pay $1 for a cigarette. Usually I just pick up the Snipes and roll one, but I didn't make it down to the place with the $2 rolling papers or whatever. So,
gotcha.
Thank you. Oh. Uh, uh, Well, maybe because I let it sit for such a long time. Maybe that coil issue that it's supposed to have is not going to be an issue right now. It doesn't seem to be a coil problem. It seems to be I use up way too goddamn much battery problem. Alright, let's wish me luck, right? I sure as shit use it. I know that a lot of the folks that I talk to are drug addicts, and that even talking to them could incur wrath. But the same thing goes for the police. The thing is, I need to see a verifiable change in behavior on the behalf of law enforcement.
before being able to trust them. If they're not even willing to admit that they screwed up, we got some major problems. And of course, by saying we have major problems, what does that allow? It allows these predators to go on pretending like I would threaten them. That's the thing about using the English language out of context. Just because you do doesn't mean that you should be allowed to. Doesn't make it okay. When you want to paraphrase to justify committing crimes, or to prevent your victim from being able to turn you in by abusing your position of power, when you're allowed to do it blatantly and outright, and you're allowed to do it to the most at-risk people in this country, the disabled, the homeless, and men. I happen to be all three. Now, of course, you guys hear me talking about how horrible this is. There's actually the top 5 most abused people in the country. Number 1 is children. Number 2 is former foster children. Number 3 is men. Number 4 is the disabled, and number 5 is the homeless. Now, statistically speaking, per capita, the homeless are more victimized than all of them. Gender is on the list, but not in the direction you might believe. Women are not more victimized than men. Men are more victimized than women, because men are less likely to be heard, and women know it. When a man tells you he's being victimized, it's probably a good time to listen. Just make sure it's not a Chris Stafford type of situation. Sure, he's nice, but he likes to be in control. Let's see if I can even find my keys. There they are. Hopefully I can get it started. If not, I'll have to hope that there's enough angle here for me to roll backwards and start it. Nope, I'm screwed. Let's see what's behind me. Yeah, I might experience some technical difficulties if I try to push my vehicle. There's one of them shopping cart holder things behind me. Well, there's only one way to find out, right? Ow. Alright, apparently it's not going to roll backwards for me. I'm not on enough of an angle. I keep going in and buying nickel and dime type of stuff, so I got at least an excuse to be here right now, but eventually they're going to get sick of it. I guess I better go ask. Sorry to bug you again. Is there any way I can get some help push starting my Honda Civic? It's tiny and it'll push start and reverse.
Oh, that little guy over there?
Yeah.
I could give you a jump start. How about that?
That'll work.
I got a little jump back bar.
Don't Chad then. Okay, I'm gonna keep you on the window. I'll get Chad.
Alright, now let's just hope my back isn't so whiny I can't get this damn thing open.
No, I do.
Oops, there we go. Here you go. Oops, set it down.
There we go. Battery's up in the corner there. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I ran it out, keeping it charged up on my cell phone battery.
Oh, okay.
Should I let it sit for a moment or just try it?
You see here. That's ready.
All right. I have a battery box. I just can't get it to charge. Well, not off of my inverter thing. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're welcome. One thing about going to non-drug addicts for help is that a lot of times people will assume that you must be talking to them for something drug related. One of the things about recording it is that it shows that a lot of these drug addicts are still deep down, there's still a human being in there. And it also shows that a lot of people's assumptions are wrong. But that doesn't mean you won't still get took. Also, Mr. Crabtree's stepdad is over there playing with his drones. You'll just get to see little bits and pieces of light floating around out there. He's got more than one now, though. These ones he seems to be tossing them like they're frisbees. With police not willing to do their jobs, and people basically only caring about me if I can do stuff for them, I never stood a chance defending myself. What did I do for the therapist that I was sent to for help? Well, I got them paid for a job they weren't even doing. Oh, the cops send you to us when you're abused. Well, we can't do anything. You have to go to the police. Well, I did go to the police. They sent me to you. Oh, well, let's set you up for therapy, but not do anything about ongoing abuse. Fuck, this country is fucked up. Jill Williams type. Hey, how's your night going, man? Lots of trolls in here tonight. Well, it's not the worst, it's not the greatest. I had some youngins throwing fireworks at me, so I started recording. That was about 3 hours ago, though. Really, I'd like to just go find a place to get some sleep for a while. But there's no place to park that it's not illegal. And only slightly tolerated. If it's not 11 yet, and it probably is. Yeah, it's 11:02, so I missed it by 2 minutes. I might be able to get permission to stay in this parking lot for overnight. Joe Williams typed another Adolf Hitler account in here. No, I don't see an Adolf Hitler account. Although there are a couple of Adolf Hitler accounts that have been made to harass me. There's also a few, what are the other ones? Ted Turner, Ted Burner, Tim Burner, Tim Turner, Life of Ativan, Life of Ativan 666, Life of Haldol. Yeah, there's a few names they commonly go by. There's probably 2 to 3 dozen Ted Turner accounts. Hell, I ran into half a dozen of them in one day. 3 of them in one video. I'd do the hide user on this channel button. They already had several other ones lined up. These people go out of their way. They spend a lot of time and invest a lot of time and energy into making these accounts and harassing me. I'm not allowed to do the same thing, or I'm some horrible, satanic, evil individual, according to these nut jobs. But nobody ever speaks up about how horrible this shit is. They certainly don't speak up with me. I have to pull teeth, and by the time somebody eventually pulls their head out of their ass and makes an effort, they've already cost me usually a dozen or more appointments. By the time Alexander actually came through for me, he'd already not come through on over a dozen occasions. Joe Williams typed, I saw one in here earlier when you were filming your phones. Saw a Lenny Schwartz in here once, right? Yep, there's a bunch of different types of Lenny accounts. That's the of mice and men thing. That's usually the first indicator that somebody's going to harass me, is if they start mentioning the Lenny thing. So I do keep an eye on that. See, this channel is supposed to be for getting heard, not to give people another free place to attack me and to bully me and to harass me. Hopefully now that his dad appears to be done playing with his drones over there, I can go park over there for a bit. What are the chances of me getting messed with? Oh, they're pretty good. A lot of times, no sooner I get it turned off than I get to deal with them youngins coming by and doing that shit again. I'll make a quick one around the parking lot just in case he dropped one of his drones. I'll pick it up and give it to him in the morning before it gets ran over. I'm not seeing any. Must be alright. So we don't get messed with too hardcore. Obviously, I'm afraid to turn off my phone, but I'm gonna need to, because there's no way that the electricity is sustainable. I can't afford to keep gas in here. By the way, my P.O. box here in Tillamook, Oregon is P.O. Box 701. So if you want to send me something for my birthday, which is October 18th, send it to Sean Schwartz, PO Box 701, Tillamook, Oregon. I could sure as hell use it. Trying to live on disability of $800 a month in a place that it costs $3,200 a month to live. It ain't easy. Actually, it's decently not possible. Joe Williams typed, "Why do they call you Lenny for? You seem like a smart and decent person." To bully me, of course. Pretend like I'm some sort of an idiot who doesn't know his head from his ass. They like using the term mentally ill to pretend I'm some sort of a nut job. Then, of course, there's the hurry up and wait thing, and there's a lot of people that want me to do favors for them that I try to. There's one guy wanted some help getting a car so he could make some extra money and hopefully help me make some extra money. I was going to go down there yesterday, but life just kept on happening. People got lots of expectations, and there's only one of me, and my disabilities suck, and people don't understand that when they ask me to do them a favor, it may take me 2 or 3 days to recover from having to walk somewhere even. There are dozens of videos that have them youngins harassing me and bullying me in them. There's also dozens and dozens of recordings here with the cops, with 911, with 988. .988 pushes people to commit suicide. Anyway, I'm gonna try and get some sleep, I guess. The folks who said that they'd be able to help me today, they didn't get back a hold of me today. They did get a hold of me at like 1 o'clock in the morning. The problem is, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was lucky enough to be able to get to sleep. Of course, the message didn't ding on my phone until like 7:30 this morning. 7, something like that. Anyway, I'm a hurting unit, but I'm trying, you know? Trying to get something productive done, trying to keep myself safe. Part of that includes keeping my environment safe. And that's real difficult to do. See, if the environment isn't safe for others, it's certainly not safe for me because I'm easy to take advantage of. And there's lots of folks who want to argue that, you know, because I'm intelligent, I can't be taken advantage of. Like I'm intelligent, people can't try to use the mentally ill tag to pretend I'm some sort of a nut job out to eat everybody's kids. You know, it's sickening that people are allowed to do that. I didn't go out of my way to hurt people. I just tried real fucking hard to get heard. And there's a reason I had to try so hard to get heard. It's because people are mean. A lot of people are mean. It's not just 1 or 2 people in the world that are shitty. Anybody who gets busted lying, it's just a little white lie to them, but it's very important to you. But then they try to convince you that it shouldn't be important. Well, you know what? When somebody's taking ongoing abuse over something that is so important to you, you don't even want to hear it. Obviously, that person isn't your friend, and you shouldn't pretend to be their friend or pretend to care about them. And that's what it's really like being a disabled person, especially in this country. If you're abused, especially as a disabled male, you must have chosen it. You deserve the abuse that you endure because you're a male. Because you're predisposed to rape and a bunch of other crazy shit like that. Like, hell no. I'm a person, and I deserve to be treated like a person. I also believe in equality. I believe that women should be treated the way that they treat us. I believe that's fair. Instead of this moral injustice, where all men are just assumed to be guilty no matter what. Of course, you can buy your way out if your name is... it don't matter what your name is. If you've got the money, you can buy your way out. That doesn't mean I agree with it. Stating a fact is not the same as agreeing with it. Let's see. This person wrote something that's apparently... It says, Joe Williams, it says, my brother gets treated like he's retarded. Unfortunately, he has Asperger's. Yeah, Asperger's ain't the same as being retarded by a long shot. Usually people with Asperger's, one of the defining features is our brilliance. We are bright as a motherfucker. We're known for being more intelligent than those around us, and many of us are known for knowing without learning. That's a weird concept for a lot of you. Whereas we can sit down and analyze something and come to the right conclusion, even form complex mathematical understandings in our own heads that are taught in school books, but we're able to figure it out on our own, in our heads, as we're looking at problems. And a lot of people aren't lucky enough to be like that. They're not lucky enough to understand what it's like to have a brain that works like that. By the way, here's part of that firework they threw at me earlier. It's soaking wet. Joe Williams typed, "Has your father ever bullied you for it?" Oh yeah. Of course, he didn't treat me like I was Lenny. Well, he did when I wouldn't do exactly right when he wanted it. He'd treat me like I was Lenny. But most of the time, he treated me like I was, and I'm not sure if you've ever seen this movie. Depends on your age, I suppose. It's a movie with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. It's called Rain Man. Let's see, Joe Williams typed, not everyone can figure it out. I suck at math, LOL. Well, I suck at math too. I mean, I'm good at it. I'm actually really good at it, but only if practiced, and I haven't had to practice with math in a while. I'm good at figuring out equations on my own, but of course that depends on if it's something I get to practice on. Is one of my bullies getting ready to drive by? Nope. I'm constantly on edge because I have to deal with these bullies in real life too. It's not just on the internet. The abuse here in Tillamook, Oregon, by the citizens as well as the police started as soon as I got here. Like, I didn't even get a chance before I was being harmed to the point that, well, for example, with the police, with them doing the shit that they pulled the first week I was here, there's no way to safely go to them to turn anything in. That's like asking someone to hurt me, having to go in and talk to them alone. And having to turn them in to themselves alone, that's even worse. Because then they just bully me and harass me for going to them for help. Pawn me off on mental health and then say, oh, we tried to help you. We sent you to mental health. Fucking pieces of shit. Anyway, I'm ending this video. Joe Williams type, yeah. Yeah, my dad thought I was going to be some sort of computer genius. Like every autistic person is a magic mathematician and a computer genius. Like, no, when we're into something, we get really into it. When you try to force us to get into something, that's not the same. You either harm our autonomy, and that's what most of you do. We're not allowed to have a crisis. We're not allowed to speak up about abuse. Or you treat us like we're retards. And worse, you treat us like we're gonna be violent retards who are out to hurt you, while you are actually hurting us. After you actually hurt us, then you go, oh, well, I thought he was gonna hurt me. He's mentally ill. And no, the fuck you didn't. You fucking knew better. Natalie Bollinger was embarrassed. Maddie Bowe was embarrassed. Alicia Bollinger was embarrassed. And when they got busted, what did they do? Illegal shit. What did their friends and family do? Both before and after Natalie was killed? Gang stalked me. Illegal shit. Not that it mattered. It was all decided by the media. My predators use the media to spread slander. The media assumes that because I'm homeless, that it must be a mentally ill dude who couldn't take no for an answer. They spread that to the public, and the public will literally never let me have an honest day in court or a decent life. This is why I am for assisted termination of life, especially for people like me and for people like Natalie. Obviously, my family was never going to do anything but take advantage of me. And it's the same thing with hers. To this day, I ask for termination of life for myself. Because to this day, I haven't found anybody who actually gives a shit enough about me to find out what's going on or help me to turn this shit in. People's idea of helping me is arguing with me, as if I must be too retarded to know what's going on in my own life. As if they tell me something pretty, that it'll magically fix all of my problems and I'll never have to worry again. Because they told the retard what to do, magically it'll all be fixed by, well, that's not how it really works. In the real world, well wishes don't do shit. When you got a friend of yours that's stuck out in a swamp, and it didn't start off as a swamp, it started off as you and your neighbor living next door. But then a flood comes in, you're able to get out of there, and you think to yourself, I got a boat out at the high ground. I could probably take that boat down there and get my neighbor out of that nasty-ass swampland before he drowns. But, it's kind of warm and cozy on the high ground. I think I'm just going to sit here and take a nap. Well, good intentions aside, your neighbor's dead now because he fucking drowned. Because you weren't able to motivate yourself to do something in a timely and efficient manner. And you'll tell yourself it's not your fault. Well, it was your choice to do nothing. Joe Williams typed, I've heard of Rain Man, but I haven't seen the movie. What's it about? Joe Williams typed, right. Talk about lazy people. There's a lot of them. That's the problem with the majority of the people that were sent to for help. They've got government jobs. They get paid whether they do their job or not. Every one of them have the same excuse that they're overwhelmed. They have overwhelming caseloads. And so on and so on. What it comes down to is they don't want to do their job if they don't have to. Anyway, good to be with you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and your sister's too, and no victim left behind.